Hello and welcome to the tutorial video for the settings menu creator asset. First, let's start with the importing. Just like any other asset from the package manager, you import what you want to import. In this case, I'm going with the pro version. I will later also install the other ones for dedicated tutorial videos on the add-ons, but for now we're just going to go with the pro version, which also comes with the base or free version that you can always check out first before making a purchase. So the first thing that you'll be seeing is this manager window with some basic introduction, where to find information on what aspects of the asset, some version comparison for the add-ons, pro, complete bundle, etc. The second tab is for the samples. This is based on what you have actually imported. So if you have the add-ons imported, there will be additional samples available for those as well. You can just click import, and just like with importing an asset, it will show you this pop-up window. Then you can just import and check out the demos. The demos will be located in the CitrioN SMC demo folder. Let's do that real quick so you can see it here, and you can check out all the scenes of the different aspects of the asset. For the documentation, there are, just like with the samples, based on what you have imported, certain documentation available. So in our case, we have the core and the pro documentation, both for offline, which will be located in your project, or the online, which will open it in your preferred web browser. There's also inspector documentation that you can expand or collapse by using the question mark in the inspector to get more additional information on fields or what a certain script is about. For the support, there's certain links that you can use to join the Discord server, open the forum thread, or send me an email. If you're happy with the asset, feel free to also write a review. That's always helpful, as it does increase exposure on the asset store, so more people can find out about the asset. For the resource generator, which we'll talk about in a second, but this is the starting point for all your new menus. Settings collection is essentially a scriptable object that contains all your settings and can easily be modified here, or just by clicking on the scriptable object and doing that in the inspector. But we'll go about the details for that in a second as well. For the integrations tab, there are currently 3 integrations, more to come for popular existing assets by other developers. So in this case, we have the DLSS and FSR3 upscaling assets, as well as the Master Audio 2024 asset, which you can import an integration, and this will, depending on the integration, contain certain features, such as for the FSR3 upscaling asset, it will add 3 settings that you can then add to your menus specifically for the FSR3 algorithm within the asset. Now, this will require you to, of course, have the asset from the other developer imported in your project as well. And it will tell you, in this case, it's not imported, so there's no point really in importing the integration. And you can also check out the asset store page for that dedicated asset by clicking on the asset store button. For uninstalling, which I'll show you in a second, but since the asset is using packages, you cannot just click in the assets folder and click and delete, because packages cannot be deleted. You would need to go to the package manager and do it from there. So for convenience purposes, you can use this and select what you want to uninstall and remove. But we'll go over that in a second. So this is a quick overview part of the manager window. And the next thing is we're gonna go step by step over how you can create your first menu. The first step to creating a new settings menu is going to Tools, CitrioN Settings Menu Creator Resource Generator. The resource generator allows you to generate all the necessary resources, things like prefab, scriptable objects, etc., that you will need for a functional settings menu. The first thing is it requires a resource creator profile. Since we do not have one, let's create one real quick in the showcase folder. Now we can take a look at the options that we have for the resources. The UI toolkit section I will not cover in this video. For the general section, let's take a look at the settings saver. That's how your settings will be saved. In the free version, you only have access to the player prefs option, but if you have the pro version, you can also choose to go with JSON or the XML file format. For the source collection, you can copy existing options for the resources from an existing settings collection. By default, this is empty. And for additional settings, this will copy the settings from the list on this collection and additional ones if you add more in the order they are showing up in this list. This preset contains 4 settings, which are all available in the free version. So for showcasing purposes, this is here, but you can remove it. Let's do that and continue to the UGUI section. In the UGUI section, you have the option for the settings menu prefab to be changed. I recommend keeping it the default one unless you want a more specific use case, such as a world space canvas. For the layout, by default, it's a simple one with a background, and we'll go with that for the tutorial, but you can choose column preset or tab menu, horizontal and vertical as well, if you want to have that as your starting point. Starting point meaning whatever you generate here can be modified further after the generation. So it's never set in stone what you go from the start. You can always replace things as you see fit. For the provider collection, what is a provider collection? It is a collection of providers. Now, what is a provider? A provider determines what the input element is going to be for a specific setting. The UI elements being things like a drop down, a slider, a button, things like that. So for example, for a yes or no or true or false setting type, so shadows enabled, shadows disabled, it would, for example, by default pick a toggle. You can customize this further down the road. I'll go over that in a separate video because that's more advanced customization. For the style profile allows you to modify the visuals, things like colors, font sizes, etc. Dynamically, both at runtime and in the prefab, by modifying some variables instead of having to open many prefabs at once, or one after the other rather, and making changes and then seeing what those changes are. So this is another handy way of improving and speeding up your workflow on getting the visuals that you want for your menu. So let's go with these options and generate the resources. If you do not have the TextMesh Pro Essentials imported, you will also see a prompt that allows you to import them right away, and otherwise it will not really work. So make sure you do that if you get the prompt. So the next thing is it will open the prefab that was generated. It will select the settings collection that was generated. You can see all the options it has in the inspector. You can see the prefab here, and you can see all the resources in the project window that were generated. And let's go over these first before we go into detail on the settings collection. For the resources that were generated, we have the prefabs for things like the button, drop down, etc. You can modify these as you see fit. These are all generated prefab variants, so you cannot really make any errors like accidentally changing anything from the source. For the providers, you have one provider for each of these elements, and the provider collection, which holds the information on the provider and when to pick which one. By default, this is by type, but there are further customization options for specific use cases, which will again be covered in a separate video. For the menu part, you have the layout, which is currently open. You can see the folder structure here. You have the settings menu itself, which controls the opening and closing during runtime, which has a few references, such as the layout, the settings collection, and the style profile. So this is what you have in your scene, and which will also create or instantiate the layout at runtime. So let's take a look at that here. So that's the scene that was generated. If you disable this in the generation process, you will of course not have this, but by default it's enabled, so you can already test your menu. Let's take a look at that, which is empty right now because we didn't go with the default couple showcase settings, but we'll fix that in a second. We have a light, event system, and the menu prefab here, the essentials that you will need for the menu to function. Now we have next thing being the style profile. It's just a collection of variables for colors mostly and floats. We have a font variable here, and you can add them as you see fit from this drop down here. There are also for UI Toolkit a bunch of variable types that you can choose from. The scene we already had, and the settings saver, we went with the player prefs. One, you can have the current player prefs being deleted by clicking this button. By default, the key for the player prefs is the settings, but again, this is another video covering this in more detail, as well as the other settings savers. And the most important one, the last one here, the settings collection, is where you mostly do all your work around your settings. So let's do that next. All right, let's start by adding settings to our settings collection and therefore the prefab. Let's click on the settings collection and open the prefab so we can see all the changes that we're doing. Now, the first thing is adding a new setting. Let's go with frame rate. This is not available in the free version, but I'm just going to use it for demonstration purposes. It's part of the pro version. So now we added this, and we can click on this Add All button to have it added automatically to our prefab. Now let's go with another one. Let's go with shadow distance, for example, and also add this. Now, for example, if you rearrange your settings in the list here, so say you want them be in this order, you can do it and then choose one of these options here, reorder all or reorder selected. Reorder selected meaning selected in this list. So let's go with reorder all, and it will automatically reorder all the settings. This is much more convenient than going in the list here, finding the relevant input elements here, and then manually rearranging them in the prefab. So that's another convenience option that you can go for to quickly change the layout and order of your settings. All right, let's add another one. Let's go with audio enabled maybe, which will be a toggle. Add that as well. All right, we can also, of course, remove all and say you want to specifically add only a few. You can select it and add selected or remove selected. That's pretty much all the options you need for adding and removing. Reorder I already covered. You can also, let's add all and reorder the settings down here. So in case you made changes here and you wanted to go back to this order, you can do that by reordering the settings based on your current ordering in the prefab. Now you can select all or select selected. By selecting all, it will select all the UI elements relevant to the list. Be aware this will select them and override the selection in the inspector. So if you want to avoid that, you have to pin this here. And oh, that's the wrong one. Select all to keep your settings collection selected. Show all setting objects. We'll select a few more, so let's do that. You'll see the content, container title, and container buttons horizontal. These are available on the prefab to hold certain specific settings, such as the title up here has its own section and a button section down here. I'll show you that in a second when we add a reset button and a title and a header. All right, for the remaining buttons here, update prefab pretty much does a few things here, like reordering, adding, etc. Initialize elements is if you make changes, for example, to change the shadow distance label to shadows, for example. If you override the label, you can initialize and it will update it in the prefab. Add style profile scripts are relevant if you want to use the style profile system. They will need to be attached to the prefab. By default, they are, being the register style listener in hierarchy or and apply style profile scripts. But if you don't want to use them, you can remove them, for example. And if you want to have them back, add them here. All right. If you, for example, for even more advanced users, you can also assign a provider collection here. Again, as a reminder, providers will be handling the addition of UI elements. So if you have another collection, for example, having rounded or visually much different UI prefabs, you can drag and drop them here and have them be used instead of the default one here, which will be used if there's no override here. So that's for really advanced usage, and I'll show you that in a separate video again if when we go into more detail about this. But so far that's probably all I want to show on for this section. But let's finish up with the reset button to be added, and let's add that first and show you what it will look like if you don't make the change that I'm about to show you. So this will show the button in the list, but again, I talked about this section being reserved or optionally usable for buttons down below here, and that would be accessible using the parent identifier. By default, this is using settings-parent, which if we go to the content here, it has settings-parent as a setting object for its identifier, and that's how the system knows where to attach these objects to. So if we go to this container button here, it uses buttons parent, and I can copy that and use that for our reset button, paste that in here or type it manually and reorder all, and you can see it's now at the bottom here. The same goes for the title. The title section is here and uses the menu title as the identifier. So let's add that as well. Settings collection, I'm gonna go with an empty one because it's just using a label. I'm gonna use the menu title parent identifier, and let me add and show you that's not how you actually want to have it, because it's now using a button. We don't want to use that. Let's change the custom label first. So that's our settings title and initialize. So we don't want it to be a button, and to change that you would need to override or use a different provider. So for the UGUI, which we're using right now, we're gonna enter title from name, and then let's remove the selected and add the selected, and now it's using actually a label or the title prefab from the provider collection. So let's take a look how that works. On the provider collection, there's an entry for title, and it's using the title provider, and this is using the title prefab, which is just a label. And that's how you can also create your own providers and specifying a certain name for it. In this case, I use title, and there's one for headline, one for container, and yeah, if you want to use a dropdown, for example, where it would not by default use a dropdown, you can do that too. But this will be covered in more detail again in a specific video about that. Let's open it up again, and that's how our menu will look like. So let's take a look at that in the game actually. So you can see it looks exactly as the one in why is this so big? There we go. That's the prefab, and that's at runtime. You can see that's exactly the same. So you can work in the prefab and then take a look at the final result to make sure it's all as intended at runtime. Next step will be to customize it using the style profile. All right, let's customize the visuals of our menu using the style profile system. Let's click on the style profile, and we want to pin it. So if we select something, it will stay in the inspector. Now, the style profile being a collection of variables that you can add and remove, modify, etc., allows you to just at one place modify everything and see it in real time. How that affects the visuals. So let me give you an example. For the background image, we can easily change and see how that affects it. Now, how is this done? Let's take a look at the prefab used for that. So we have the image menu background prefab here in our menu layout. Let's unpin this and select this and take a look how this is done. We have a style listener for a color for an image, and it's using the key background image, just the same as the one on the style profile up here. And that's how the system knows, okay, if the color of the specified key changed, then in this case we want to change the image background color or image color. We have this image on here referenced, and it will essentially update this color variable, which you can also see as a prefab override here because we made changes, and even though it's back to the default, it just did override it to black again. There are some extra options on this style listener, and there are more listeners than that. So if we go with style listeners, you can see there are several that you can choose from for different variable types. And these are all already on the prefabs for the relevant style profile entries. Not all of them are on prefabs, but you can add them yourself if they are necessary. But these are ones that I considered being relevant for most people. You can easily customize and change these as you see fit though. So let's, for example, add a float variable, and this is called primary image roundness and 1.3. So we have some roundness on our UI elements. As you can see, this is an existing listener on all the elements. So if we take a look at let's go with the button and go to the background. You can see it has a stylus of type float with the primary image roundness key, and it changes the pixels per unit multiplier on the image component. It's not by default on the style profile because many people might want to change this on the prefab itself, but as soon as this is available on a style profile, it will be overwritten using this style listener. Now let's go back to our prefab. Let's not change, save the changes. And what else can we change? Let's go back to the style profile, pin it. Let's say we want to change the primary image, do some green. Let's make a green text as well. Let's go with the same green, and let's scroll in a bit and change the, let's give it a glow. We can achieve this using the underlay color. Now there's some offset, as you can see. Let me get very close to it, and the offset, let's give it a 0, and let's dilate it to 0.3 and give it some softness. And now you can see there's some sci-fi-esque glow on the text. Same goes for the title because it's using the same variables, but you could give your title prefab different variables if you would want to. Let's also make that for the black text here that's using the primary text inverted, and let's go with the underlay color here. Let's also make it black, make it show, make it non-offset, dilate, and some softness. Now it's more glowy. Yeah, that's how you can make these changes. You can use your own font and we'll update all the fonts. And this is very useful instead of having to open this prefab and this prefab and this prefab and this prefab and the button prefab to make something as simple as changing a font, having to open 5 to 10 prefabs instead of just having to drag and drop these things here and see the changes immediately. Same goes for font size. We can make it bigger. We have a title, so make this much bigger. We use the underlays. Let's could also give it a outline color. Go with red and give it an outline width. You can see now it has an outline color as well, but let's remove that again. Yeah, the primary image roundness I have shown you. You could make this very large to go back to sharp angles. Highlight image refers to the selected object. We could also take a look at that. So one way to do is go to the settings collection and let's click on target frame rate, select selected, and we have our label here, and let's go to the selected highlight, enable this. This is how it would look like. It has a green bar on the side, and it's actually using the primary image in this case, but let's go and change this. Go to the style profile and highlight image and go back to this. Make sure to paste that in, and in our case we want this for all of them, so let's apply this to the prefab itself, being this one here, and let's go back to this style profile and make a change here to something, I don't know, red for example, and let's save it and take a look at it at runtime. And we didn't revert the change here, so let's do that real quick. Let's select this again and make sure we revert this change and save it. And now go back into it, and you can see if I select something else, this will be the red bar on the side indicating which one is selected, and you can see it's all working. You can reset it. It's going to persist through play sessions and of course at runtime in your game as well. And that's how you can modify everything using the style profile system. The last thing that I want to show you in this overview video is how to remove the asset again, because it's using the packages and these cannot be just removed by hitting delete. You will get a warning that this is not possible, because that's true for all the packages. You could delete the CitrioN folder here, but that's not going to remove the asset itself. And for convenience purposes, there are multiple ways you can do that. You can go to this Uninstall Asset option here, or if you want more control, you can go to the Uninstall tab in the Manager window and remove from Assets directory, which removed everything inside the CitrioN folder. If you want to also remove the CitrioN folder, you have to do that manually, because there may be other assets from me in there, and I don't want you to accidentally remove those. And then you can select these or use these buttons here and remove selected and remove packages to confirm, showing you the ones that will be removed. Have it recompile, and then it will no longer be in your project. Normally you would have to go to the package manager and click on each of the packages one after the other and remove them manually. Now there will be some errors in case you had some menu here. In our case we had the showcase menu, which is still in there, referring to no longer existing scripts. If the clear clears all the errors, which it does, you're good to go. Otherwise get in touch with me. There may be something else going on, but in our case we can just delete the showcase files, and then we have everything removed from the asset. That's all I want to show you in this video. I hope this gives you a brief overview and how to get going with the asset. There will be more detailed overview videos for different aspects and other things, like how to open the menu from code or from a Unity event using a button, things like that. If you have any topics that you want to see covered in a tutorial video, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But other than that, thank you for using my asset, and I'll see you next time.